Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matthew Clemo, CSI, Account Director at CSI. Welcome to the FS webinar series, the continuing series that we've been running throughout the winter. And today we're going to be talking about modernizing with Azure and ensuring that you're protecting those valuable assets as you adopt the newer technologies today. Today we've got a good cast of experts from CSI that will be supporting this webinar. We have Amar Bias, who is a public cloud leader, Leighton Jeffries, a head of security solutions, and Jason Normanton, our head of cloud services. Just as a very quick intro, I think, you know, there's a lot of with the advent of the hyperscalers, and especially with Microsoft Azure, who we've worked with strategically over the last couple of years. There's tremendous opportunity now for organizations and individual employees to really empower themselves in terms of delivering IT and accelerating innovation. But moving into this new service paradigm, we want to make sure that make sure that you're able to protect your most valuable assets within your business. And this is really what we're going to be talking through today in terms of looking what is the opportunity to really accelerate that innovation within the organization and empower that employee, and then make sure that you can protect against that as you're doing it. So I'd like to just hand over really initially to Amar to talk about the opportunities that Microsoft Azure give to organizations.
Thanks, Matt. I just want to start with kind of a definition of what the modern workplace is from Microsoft's stance. So Microsoft has brought out a bunch of products to help people work more collaboratively. And again, throughout this kind of pandemic period, it's kind of shown that people aren't just sat in the office, they're out and about. They could be hundreds of miles apart. And this is just trying to get everybody to work together and help bring a set of tools in a single subscription by Microsoft, just to make sure that you can send out files, you can put security in there and pay a monthly fee. And it's a completely transparent license model. So Microsoft have brought the modern workplace using Office 365 licensing. And from there, again, with the picture on the right-hand side, it's just a high-level insight of what's available to you on the licensing front. Next slide, please, Matt. So Microsoft has brought down in 6 different pillars of what the modern workplace is. So first is Office 365. I think everybody has come across the meeting or some sort of application on there. So you get stuff like Outlook, Office, you get SharePoint, Teams, you get Yammer on there. So it's all in a single license. The next step is Microsoft also released a phone system in the cloud. So it's very much tailored towards people who have on-premise PBX systems, so hardware devices sat in the office, and they want to move away from that. So Microsoft have moved that into the cloud to sat on Azure, and now all your telephone systems sat in the Azure platform. You can work from anywhere, so that being from home, in the office, or even if you're on in a different country, you can connect into that phone system. One of the new offerings, what Microsoft have offered with the Business Voice, is a contact center as well. So if you do have a big call center, in theory, you could move that over into the Microsoft 365 Business Voice platform. Next one is EMS suite. So this is the Enterprise Mobility Suite. This is a whole bunch of products that can help you secure your data. So obviously, data is the most valuable asset to any sort of business. Microsoft have brought out a whole bunch of tools of governing that data and making sure it's protected, and it's protected against kind of vulnerabilities and attackers. Next one is the whole bunch of apps in there. The main ones what Microsoft are really pushing is Microsoft Teams. Again, everyone's probably heard of that through the pandemic period. Really good collaborative tool. People using it for IMs, doing it through voice meetings, webinars. So It's all available all through this platform, and from the Power Automate and Power BI, which I'll come on later on in the slide deck. And the last two is SharePoint. So SharePoint's the online web-based platform. So again, a collaborative tool to be able to create team websites, share documents, and basically just use it as a platform through a web portal to gain access for external and internal people. And last one is Azure. So this is moving some of your virtual machines into the Azure platform. So Azure is a big public cloud platform. It's spread out globally. But in the UK, we got 2 regions, UK West, UK South, and they have multiple data centers to protect you from resiliency. Next slide, please. So looking at what 3 points mean for the modern workplace, again, it's productivity. So again, having calls, meetings, being able to store your files and share files, and office applications. And again, by using that license, you get access to a whole bunch of security tools, so you can protect against cyber threats, making sure your data is secure. So for example, if you want to classify certain sensitive data, you can set certain rules on there so you can't share it out to external people, and that data set is kept internally. And from there, it's all based on the one single license, what paid through a monthly fee, and it's a completely transparent license. You know what you're getting, and if you want to upgrade at any point, it's fully possible for going up and down through the licensing model with Microsoft. Next slide, Matt. So again, so this is a really good example of how people are working right now. So by using the full set of the modern workplace features, for example, if you have a user who's using Microsoft Teams, they may send an email or they may send an IM to an external user and try sharing some sensitive data. So the best bit about the Office 365 product set is you get a bunch of tools to protect your data. So that could be retention policies or even legal hold to make sure that your business is protected. So a really good example of this could be if you have a user who sent out some sensitive information. It could be, for example, a passport for someone's personal information. In theory, you could keep a 7-year retention just by picking up keywords from a passport number or even a picture of a passport. You could set a legal hold to keep that for so many months or so many years. And again, if we want to keep that under archive, so somebody again sends sensitive information, you can set a data tag on there and put that into archive for however long we want to on the platform. Next slide, please. So again, the top concerns for a lot of businesses moving to Office 365 is, well, normally a customer would always keep the data on premise. Moving that into the cloud could be scary for a lot of businesses. So there's lots of questions that come over on this. So is it secure? It's a really secure platform. Microsoft are constantly evolving it, constantly updating the security profile, tying up any known vulnerabilities. They're on it straight away, as the responsibility model is not now for the customer, it's now Microsoft's responsibility to keep that secure. Who has access to that data whilst it's up there? Basically, anybody who has a username and password to get into that environment. Again, you can set limits to what that user has access to. Again, think of the same principle as if you have a file server on site. You can set permissions, so only certain people can access certain amounts of data or certain folders in that environment. Probably one of the top questions what we always get is that data encrypted. So being kind of with the FCA and the PRA compliant, you need to make sure that data is encrypted. So at rest, the data is encrypted on that platform. So say if somebody walked into the data centers and they tried taking some of the hard drive or the hardware from Microsoft, nobody can uncrypt that. It's fully encrypted. Again, there's another question on top of that is it encrypted in transit? With Microsoft's responsibility model, that's definitely pushed onto the customer. And if you want secure access to Azure or even Office 365, you need to put that in place yourself and have that secure encrypted transmission points. Top one for kind of financial services. Does it does it comply with regulations? It does. There's certain things what you have to do out of the box. It won't be compliant, but Microsoft has a whole bunch of tools and configuration options to help you make sure that that does meet regulations. So being with the FCA or PRA, there's certain tick boxes and configuration settings that you can apply to make sure that's meeting regulation standards for the business. What controls can you add in to protect the business? There's a whole bunch of DLP protections, data loss protection control in there. You can classify data in there. So again, if there's any financial records, you can set that through the Office 365 portal and ensure that if you do come across this data set, make sure it's logged under sensitive data, and then there's certain controls in there. So you could set when that person can only send out to somebody in the team. And if it goes out of the team, it will stop that and alert the IT teams that something's happened here, can you investigate? So it's all built into the Office 365 portal. And one of the other ones is who looks after security. So again, pretty much a shared responsibility. Microsoft do take the security profile in the back end very seriously. So it's pretty much Microsoft's responsibility, but at the end of the day, it's also the customer's responsibility to look after their security. So again, bunch of tools in there is like MFA. You can enable multi-factor authentication. So when you log into that environment, you're going to get challenged by multiple forms of authentication that you have to pass to be able to access that data. So it's also a customer's responsibility to make sure that's secure as well. But with the Office 365 platform, all the back-end stuff is taken care of, so you don't have to worry about that. And the last one is data residency. So where's that data actually set? So again, right at the start of your Office 365 journey, you'll be running through the setup configuration, and you'll always put in where do I want to keep that data. You can choose wherever you want, but being financial services in the UK, you can set that it cannot leave the UK, and all, for example, emails, if you have any Excel data, is all sat on UK file servers. Again, part of the financial services compliance needs are you have to set that rule to make sure it sits within the UK. Next slide, please. So out of the Office 365 licensing, the main thing what's probably going to be most useful for financial services network is probably going to be the Intune piece on this. So Intune is a really powerful tool. You can use that to control, for example, your devices, that would be your laptops or your mobile phones, and you can set certain restrictions on those. So for example, if somebody wants to add their mobile phone in, you can firstly choose, is it a personal device or is it a company device? You can set a policy for bring your own devices, or if you don't want that at all, you can lock that down, just going, the only devices that can connect into my environment are company-owned devices, what I know about. Again, you can set that mobile phone needs to have a passcode. It needs to have a passcode of, for example, 9 numbers that you need to unlock your phone. It needs to be a certain level of iOS or Android. And then failure from that is if the device doesn't meet compliance, we can block that off the network so it can't access any of the data what's sat on Office 365. Again, if you want to add in some of your Windows laptops, that can all be added through Intune. So one of the best bits of that is you can encrypt a device without even that device having to come into the office. So if it's out and about and it's on the internet, you can create a policy to go all the company devices need to be encrypted, and the hard drive will then get encrypted using BitLocker, and the key will be sent over into Azure. And if you ever need to decrypt that device, you can get the key quite easily through the portal, as long as you have access and the correct privileges on there. And again, just I touched on it briefly. For example, if any of these devices don't meet any of the compliant policies, we can stop that device from accessing any of the company resources. So that'd be in Office 365, could be ServiceNow, it could be Salesforce. So we can make sure that all the devices that are compliant and known to the business are accessing company data. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to Azure. So Azure is a really powerful platform. There's a bunch of tools built into the platform that can help the financial services kind of comply to known best practices. And for example, if the company needs to be PCI compliant, you can set some policies in there to give you a really high level scanning of the environment to make sure it meets PCI compliance. So again, if you move a virtual machine into Azure, you can create a policy, and that policy can scan for, is it compliant to PCI? Is it compliant to CIS benchmark standards and also security standards. And if there's any known vulnerabilities or, for example, common mistakes in configuration, that will all get flagged up through your security center and actually score your environment for how secure that is as well. Again, really good tool for looking at a high level kind of overview of what your environment in Azure is looking like. It's really powerful tool. Can't stress enough that kind of this is a straight out of the box of what's possible. Just kind of with just setting that up only takes half an hour and you'll get these massive insights into your environment as well. And it's always something to act on. If there's a known vulnerability, you'll get made aware of it. So you're constantly aware of what's happening in that environment, and it's getting updated in real time as well. So any new vulnerabilities that appear, it will pop up into Azure Security Center to take action on that as well. Next slide, please. Now, one of the best bits about an Office 365 license, you get access to Power Apps. So Power Apps is a new application. It's been around only for a few years, but it's massively powerful. So again, there's lots of scenarios where you think, oh, is there an application for that? Can I do this, or do I need to go out to market? Those days are gone. You can now create that application on the fly in the Office 365 portal. For example, a really good one for this is if you need to create a new customer bank account. In theory, you could create a portal to grab some of that information that you need. And by using some of the automation in the back end of Power Apps, you could drop that information into certain platforms. So for example, if you need to add it into creating a bank account, and then you need to create another profile for creating a user with all the details in the two separate platforms. In theory, by creating that Power App, you can get that done, and you can push that out to your staff. And even if you wanted to push it out to some of your customers, it's all possible, and you can deliver that all through, for example, a PC, online, or even your phone. So you can get that delivered nice and quickly. Again, a massive breakthrough in kind of being agile and moving forward and kind of responding to the market as quick as you can. Next slide, please. Now, Microsoft Power BI, again, a really hot topic for the past few years. Power BI gives you a massive insight into what's happening to the environment. As long as your data is being able to be read by the Power BI platform, in theory, you can read that and get really good insights of what's happening throughout your business. So a really good example is if you set a limit on, well, I want 20 customers a month, you can track how that's happening every month in real time. And every time somebody opens a bank account, oh, all right, we've got one here, and then you can slowly reach your targets. Again, real-time information, if you need to push people through your business to be able to take more action, you've got the insights there and you know what you're working on. All these platforms are shareable internally and externally to some users as well. I just want to call out that, again, being able to share externally does require a separate license. But again, it's all built into Microsoft's Office 365 licensing. Next slide, please. And this is where it gets quite interesting with Power BI. So again, if you're sharing important data, what maybe one of the touch points is sensitive information in the back end, you want to be able to control that. So just on your screen, there's a really good example of somebody trying to download some sensitive information by using the EMS controls built into the Office 365 licensing. It's blocked that download, and it's also reported in the back end that someone's tried downloading important information. So it just means the IT team or the security team can take action on that. If it's an internal user, they can create a case of, well, why was that user trying to access it? Was it a mistake, or was it a genuine security incident? So again, the EMS platform for Office 365 is really powerful. It has many touch points in the platform, so you can read your, for example, Exchange data or your SharePoint data, and it's just reading the entire environment in real time and giving you actions and protecting you to make sure that data isn't getting leaked out into public hands. Next slide, please. So the biggest one for obviously the financial services network is being able to access audit reports. So the Azure platform is compliant to a lot of standards, for example, ISO, PCI standards. If you do need access to that at the time of an audit, you can access the Security Center portal by Microsoft, and download some of them audit reports, but again, updated whenever Microsoft have a new audit. They're updated so you're getting the latest information. You can get there in a matter of minutes. Instead of having to go ask vendors about, oh, is your data center secure? Do you have this report? Do you have that? It's fully available to you through this portal. Next slide, please. So this is just a high-level guide on what's possible with the M365 licensing model. So GDPR's, again, hot topic for the past few years, and how do you protect yourself? I won't go too much into this, but there's a bunch of tools, Microsoft Intune, Azure Active Directory, and Azure Information Protection that are all working together. And for example, you can connect it into cloud app security. And from there, that's giving me the full 360 protection of making sure you're compliant to GDPR and your data is not leaking out and you're protected and you're not looking at a massive fine. So you've got that control sat on there and it's available to you all through a single dashboard. Next slide, please. Now, the way we've approached this is we've broken it down in 4 separate tiers. The first one is identity and access management. This is probably going to be core to any sort of business. You need to be able to have certain controls and be able to access that. So using the Office 365 and M365 product set, you've got access to these tools that can give you that control, just making sure you're secure. Next one is threat protection. So again, really hot topic. How do you protect yourself? There's obviously kind of vulnerabilities out there. There's viruses, what are out on the market, what easily can infect your environment. Microsoft has a bunch of tools built into the M365 licensing model that will protect you on there. And then information protection. So again, data is one of the most valuable assets of a business. There's a whole bunch of tools built into the M365 licensing model to help look after and classify your data and make sure that none of that sensitive information is being leaked out unnecessarily. And the last one is obviously security management. So not only does Azure and Office 365 have a whole bunch of product sets, but there's actually a portal to give you full insights on what's happening to Azure and Office 365 environments. Again, all built into a single license, but based on a monthly fee. And these can be added and removed at any point. Next slide, please. So obviously, Microsoft, over the past few years, have become one of the top security companies in the world. Year on year, they're just getting better and better with the security standards. As you can think about Microsoft, they've got billions of touch points throughout the world. They've got really good insights and they're making sense of that data and obviously improving the security posture. A whole bunch of tools available to you what leverage Microsoft security standards and their knowledge. But again, the product sets, what I've just run through, give you a really good high level and kind of touch point and what's possible. So we've got Leighton next, who's going to run through what else complements the Microsoft suite.
Yeah, thank you, Amar. Afternoon, everybody. So just sort of reiterate really Amar's point there is that, you know, as a baseline level of security, certainly with Microsoft's native tool sets that we've sort of been through from the call so far, you know, Microsoft is absolutely seen as a top right Magic Quadrant Gartner leader. One of the things that we have within CSI is a enhanced service offering, which is a combination of obviously services that CSI offer, which can certainly fill some of the gaps from a human element perspective and resource and man time effort, but also as well additional tool sets and technologies that complement Microsoft, particularly around things like 365, the modern workplace, and Azure. So within the slides today, I thought I'd run through with you just a few slides that articulate some of those service offerings that we have, and just a bit of context around our security SOC. So the purpose of this slide really is that the SOC itself is ISO 27001 accredited as a facility that we have within CSI. It's in scope as part of our recent external audits and renewed certs that we have within Birmingham headquarters. We have around-the-clock coverage with our partnerships with one of our technology vendors called Alert Logic, which help provide us with our 24/7 triage to critical and security incidents, both high and critical, which gives us access to sort of probably just over shy of about 150 SOC analysts. We work with industry-leading technology tool sets, so they're not bleeding, they're very much leading and recognized as being innovative and mature in their space from Gartner. And all of our services that we go to market with are all scalable, definable, and measurable. Next slide, please. Ooh. Perfect. And if you don't mind clicking one more. Thank you. So what I'm going to run through with you now is just our offering, particularly around our MDR Enhanced Service offering that complement Microsoft. So we have a partnership, as I mentioned, through our SIEM service that we provide using Alert Logic, which is the underpin technology and platform, which we gather and collect all of the log information and technology tool sets that we have within Microsoft and Microsoft Azure, and we apply that into a SIEM type service offering where we look to provide 24/7 platform services and support, as well as obviously triage any sort of critical or security incidents that we might see. So on top of that, we look to complement some of the tool sets from Microsoft with including things like host intrusion prevention and vulnerability management and vulnerability scanning across the Microsoft estate, whether it's public or private hybrid cloud. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to give you some context really about how the partnership and the technology and the platform all sort of integrate together. The coverage that our SIEM service has is both wide and deep in regards to coverage across multi-cloud platforms, whether that's public cloud such as things like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. We obviously look to bring in coverage and platforms such as network devices, firewalls, perimeter security, as well as obviously traditional based systems and applications. All of this information is ingested into our SIEM service, and we basically look to try and collect and analyze and enrich the information that we see. So in a sense, trying to make sense of the noise and just report back what is relevant and what is actionable intelligence to triage and look further into. I mentioned about the experts that sort of underpin the service. You have access to over sort of 150 plus SOC analysts with built-in threat intel feeds from a number of technology suites that include the likes of things like IBM from a threat intel perspective. We obviously use our partner with Alert Logic, but also one of the things that I mentioned about the other tool sets that we have within the SOC. We look to enrich and bring all of that feed in to be able to analyze and triage not just only your environment from a financial services perspective, whether that's potentially on-premise infrastructure or public cloud infrastructure or a hybrid of both, but also as well what we're seeing in the public cloud and the intelligence that can bring to put some contextualization, if you like, around your environment. Next slide, please. Perfect. So what I thought I'd do is just pull together a couple of slides here that relate to specifically Azure and Microsoft in regards to the context of our SIEM SOC service. So as I've mentioned, there is a wealth of information and devices and log sources that we can collect. Specifically in the Azure world and Microsoft world, we can collect a number of sort of collaborative tools such as Teams that we can bring in as part of our log feed. We can bring in some of the tool sets around identity, multi-factor authentication, SQL, IaaS, PaaS infrastructure, and be able to sort of go through and validate those logs and report and respond to those accordingly and feedback the analysis that we see. Next slide, please. So what I've done here is I've pulled together a shared responsibility model, which is, if I'm honest with you, not my own. It's been taken from Microsoft, but in effect, down the left-hand side, you have traditionally what the cloud provider provides you in black, which is the underlying hypervisor, the physical segmentation, the platform, the compute, the storage, the database, the resource, etc., that's available to you within public cloud with Azure. And then in orange, what you have here is where we can overlay our CSI managed services, particularly around bringing SIEM as a service, around triage and monitoring for, particularly incidents that relate to maybe compliance monitoring, endpoint monitoring, log analysis, benchmarking, as in potentially configuration checks within your environment, and obviously any potential major security or critical incidents. Now, the right-hand side, the grey, is what potentially yourselves would then look to be able to manage and maintain going forward. So, it's something to consider and think about, that when you're moving to the public cloud, if you're looking to try and do this all yourselves, then these are the kind of areas that you probably have to try and focus your time and resource and manpower efforts to. Whereas we try and sort of alleviate some of that responsibility by applying some of our enhanced service offerings to complement Microsoft. But we can certainly support you in some instances with other services that CSI provide, particularly around things like software and patch management. We do that for a number of other clients. We can certainly do as much or as little as you require. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what I've done here is just pull together a slide that just simplifies some of the slides that you've seen previously and sort of summarizes some of our SIEM service in effect. So what we try to present to you is a holistical view of your dashboards that you have and the fees that we can take from in Azure. And we try and bring that into a dashboard, a console that we can share and bring visibility that you guys can have access to. But also we support and carry out regular vulnerability scanning, identifying and looking for gaps that we may need to potentially patch or remediate. And if it's infrastructure that you manage and look after, then we can certainly provide, the mitigating guidance and recommended remediational steps for you to carry out the response. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I think I mentioned it a few slides back, but in effect, some of the real-time reporting that's available from our SOC and, obviously fed through within the console is that we're able to provide things like benchmarks and cloud configuration checks. So this is looking at, reviewing things like identity access management policies, multi-factor authentication, if that's something that you've got turned on within Azure. And obviously similarly apply some of the best practices that are recommended from our service into Microsoft as part of the Azure Response Service. Next slide. And finally, obviously outside of that, you obviously have available a number of regulatory compliance requirements packages that are available as part of our service offering, which we can similarly apply into the likes of Azure, your Azure environment. I know particularly with things like financial services, we work with a number of customers that we're looking to align to things like frameworks such as NIST and ISO 27001. There's a number of what I call quick wins or, out of the box type rules that we've used, not just that we've used for other customers, but ones that we see that are typical of day-to-day usage, and we can apply those early on so that you can start to see the benefits of the service and align yourself to the relevant compliance requirements and services. Next slide, please. Right, so the purpose of this slide is just to sort of summarize some of the key points throughout the slides that I've run through thus far. I talked about a moment ago things like out of the box configurations and rule sets. So we have a number of defined use cases available through compliance packages and what we've done with other clients where we've set up things like incidents and alarms to monitor and look for within the Azure platform that we can look to replay and apply playbooks and alarms and use cases out of the box for you straight away. So you can get a quick route to value from the service. Obviously, on top of that, we've got real-time threat awareness. So, looking to improve the visibility over and above what Microsoft provides you, but being able to sort of reduce that dwell time and reducing the time to detect and respond to an incident. So in effect, we're an extension of your team. You have access, as I say, to over 150 type SOC analysts that have eyes and glass, proactively monitoring the service 24/7. And we try and make sense of the noise and deliver what's back that is important to you. Next slide, please, Matt. So some of the core features that we have that are included as part of the service features, I mentioned about things like vulnerability scanning. We also provide things like service cadence teleconference calls. So where we look to review the console on a weekly basis, we can similarly support that as well with on-demand tuning and log review on a monthly basis so that we can continually water and feed the service and your environment to make sure that there are no gaps, and if there are any, that we can review those and remediate those appropriately. I think that concludes the SIEM service offering around Azure. So what I thought would be useful is just to sort of finalize and just run through a couple of the additional services that we have, particularly around threat detection and prevention. So this is specifically around endpoint services. So if you'd like to go to the next slide there, Matthew. One of our key services that we have within the business is an anti-phishing service and solution. So business email compromise remains the same. You know, it's one of probably the main, if not the main attack vector that traditionally is where we see ransomware come into an organization and where we see organizations fall foul to potentially clicking on a link. We offer two flavors of service around this. We provide conditioning users to recognize and report on phishing attacks. So we do this for a number of clients where we do phishing education awareness, where we do that either monthly or quarterly, where we look to give them enablement and training around content that relates to security, to phishing emails, to general best practices around security. And also we provide simulated phishing campaigns where we try to you know, reinforce, if you like, the education to see if the education has worked. On top of that, we have a zero-day prevention-based tool, which in effect, you know, looks to sit on the inbox level and looks to report the potentially phishing emails that would land in an inbox directly to our SOC so that we can take action and analyze and triage that for you on your behalf. If you go into the next slide there, please, Matthew. Thanks. So one of the capabilities that we have is in effect layering on top of Microsoft's email filter. We're able to put this this API integration directly into Microsoft 365, where we're actually able to apply zero-day protection around all things phishing emails. So this tends to work fairly well, particularly when you're looking at alternatives such as adding expensive or hard to manage security email gateways. It doesn't matter if it's Microsoft, if it's a Proofpoint, if it's a Minesweeper, whatever the technology, the vendor out there. Unfortunately, nothing is a silver bullet. So, we do see that emails do pass through typical email filters. And so this added layer of security, this added service enhancement is something that we see and particularly you could get a lot of value from. Next slide, please. So what I've also looked to include here is to identify really some of the challenges around what customers face, in particularly with the cyber landscape today. I thought I'd actually steal this graphic on the right from a previous presentation from another vendor to try and illustrate this, but I'm sure you've all been to InfoSec that if years gone by with Olympia, and when you walk into the hall, this is pretty much what you see. It's just a complete big wave of vendors, technology, loads of the next new shiny looking toys and tools, all saying that we're like the next best thing. But it's very difficult to understand where you're supposed to start. It's a bit of a minefield for any client, ISO, CISO out there. So if you take Endpoint as a space second in from the right, which I've highlighted there, today you've probably got over 100+ vendors that are actually sitting in that space. So the question is kind of where to start. When you then tie that into things like in relation to malware and ransomware for endpoint, typically what we're seeing in the market is there's a lack of a lack of trust around traditional antivirus. Clients can't keep up with the rate of change of the attack vectors. We've spoken about things like anti-phishing. We've talked about things like malicious hardware, ransomware out there. So, it's like, where do you start? And obviously there's a lot of lack of skilled cybersecurity skills that are out there today. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just to sort of summarize really with the service that's provided around endpoint, we look to provide a tool around specifically latest endpoint, next gen AV, anti-malware and anti-phishing technology. We look to provide deployment assistance, deployment configuration. We also have the ability to provide 24/7 and 9/5 access into our SOC to support that. As well as obviously the ability to respond to any malicious or suspicious activity detected. And next slide, please. So that sort of concludes the presentation for myself. I think at this stage, Matt, I'll hand it back to you, but if we have any questions.
Thank you, Leighton, much appreciated, and thank you, Amar. So we're now going to, we'll open to the audience for questions. We've got a couple of questions anyway, a couple come in, and I'll keep, while Leighton is on the boil, I would like to go back to him for the first question, if he doesn't mind. I mean, actually, in terms of the financial services, I think there's in terms of the onus to deal with the security cyber risk is changing rapidly, and I've seen recently a Sequest questionnaire from the Bank of England, asking, do you understand your threats? Are you monitoring the logs and so forth? So in terms of monitoring, how important is that, getting a better understanding of the full estate of what in terms of a customer, Leighton?
Yeah, no, perfect. That's a good question, actually. So, monitoring for me is the backbone of good cybersecurity risk management. I guess if you don't know what your assets are, or you haven't got visibility as to what's happening with those assets, then you can't really respond properly, particularly if you're under attack, really. So, I would probably say that having visibility and a proactive monitoring type service where you're reviewing the environment on a real-time basis, triaging any sort of high or critical type security incidents, then that type of approach, I think, is what enables us to be able to have identity to firstly bring visibility to the problem, and then similarly respond and remediate any effect that might have to the environment to secure it.
Great. No, thanks very much, Leighton. Another question. This is for Amar or Jason to answer, and this is more about the Power Apps. I mean, have you seen any sort of particular instances where that has really helped organisations, or if any, which is pertinent to financial services? Examples of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, Power Apps is low-code apps. So I don't know if anybody's got any experience of if then now automation. So you build sort of if statements that eventually build you some form of automation that turns your lights on, or adjusts the heating temperature at home. If this then now. The website is called iftt.com. Power Apps is a very similar concept from Microsoft. So they've taken elements like the ability to attach to a SQL data source, and they've then mixed that with functions like free-form text input, or maybe just sending an email to somebody, so that you can start to build that workflow within your app. So some of the good ones that I've seen, employee onboarding can be done purely via Power Apps. I've seen people do voting for meetings, where the voting console is within a Power App, and you sort of log on, provide your Active Directory authentication, and then it only allows you to vote once. Right through to simple things like requests for a car park space, or the ability to book a meeting room within an office. All of that can simply be made into Power Apps. If you really think about it, Matthew, it's anything that you want to automate that involves SharePoint or Outlook or Power BI information. That's all possible through a simple Power Apps low-code application that you make yourself.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that, Jason.
Just on that one of the other things that I've seen what was quite interesting while I was working for a chemical factory was they were able to use the AI feature built into Power Apps to be able to scan delivery notes. And for example, depending on how dangerous that chemical is, you can set certain requirements for the business. So the business was scanning the document and it was picking up what that chemical was, and then putting an alert in the system going, well, actually, you've got 10 liters of this really explosive chemical on the floor. Can you send an email out? So again, the power of Power Apps and get access to AI. Another one that was really interesting was a business actually used the chatbot feature, what has just come out in there, and presented it onto a website, and they were able to answer a lot of hot topic questions, what a lot of customers were asking them, all through the website. You can just program that on yourself. So any keywords that pop up in a phrase or a sentence, the chatbot's able to respond to that and give the correct information back to the customer.
Good, excellent. Yeah, excellent answer. Thanks very much, both of you. I think that's all the questions we have. So what we'll do is going to bring today's webinar to a close. And I thank you very much for everybody attending. And thank you for the panelists for giving up your time and providing your valuable knowledge. And that's been really insightful. Thank you very much. And please look out for the next webinar that we'll be sending out in due course. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Have an excellent day.
Thank you.
Cheers.